Good morning. My name is Joon, and I'm the Justice of the Supreme Court of Korea. It is indeed my great pleasure and delight to be a part of this wonderful conference. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to everybody who has joined us for this international conference commemorating King Sejong. With special thanks to my esteemed colleagues, friends, and guests from abroad. Welcome to Korea, a land of morning calm, and also land of K-pop demon hunters. For those who do not know what K-pop demon hunters is, it's a recent Netflix animated film that gained immense popularity in many countries. K-pop demon hunters features Korean pop and Korean culture, and Korean alphabets appear numerous times throughout the film. And as you have just seen in the video clip prior to my presentation, King Sejong was the monarch who created Korean alphabet. In addition to creating Korean alphabet, King Sejong's legacy spans a wide range of sectors, including medicine, agriculture, astronomy, and national defense. We have many kings and queens who have graced 5,000-year history of Korea, but no one is as revered and respected as King Sejong. He truly deserves the title, the Great. However, today I would like to focus on a relatively less examined aspect of King Sejong. King Sejong as a jurist and a legal philosopher. Please note that he lived approximately 600 years ago. It was the time when the modern legal principles that we have today, that we take for granted today, were not present. However, we can find a trace of the modern legal principles even in his time. He had a deep compassion for his people, and it was a driving force of his legal philosophy. And he was a strong advocate for the human right protection of the most vulnerable people in the society, including the defendants in the criminal trial or the prisoners in the prison. He yearned for swift and fair trial. And he was also a strong advocate of compilation of legal codes to ensure legal predictability and stability. Well, in addition to that, as you all know, he invented Korean alphabet to enhance public's access to justice. Although it all took place 600 years ago, it still holds very deep value and meaning, even from a contemporary perspective. So today, I would like to share with you some of the legal principles that were championed and cherished by King Sejong. And I will also show you some illustrative cases that show how great jurist the King Sejong was. Well, let me start from mentioning a very famous Korean phrase, 홍익 인간. To literally translate that into English, it means to broadly benefit humanities. He had a deep compassion for his people, and he really wanted people to live a happy life. He thought of law as a means to achieve an upper purpose, which is to make people happy so that people can live joyful lives. Law was merely a means to love, sympathize with, and uplift people. We can say the same thing with punishment. Punishment itself, of course, is important, but to King Sejong, it was a means to uplift, enlighten, and rehabilitate people. His idea, such democratic idea, was also reflected in the lawmaking process. One of the examples is his tax reform. He wanted to pursue tax reform, but he was also wanting to hear the small voices from the people who will be influenced by this tax reform. In line with this, he conducted a public opinion survey upon more than 170,000 farmers and local officials before implementing on taxation. And upon this finding, he implemented a new tax law based on the principle of no taxation without law. And it remained almost unchanged for 400 years. It is also very noteworthy that the public opinion survey was conducted in 1430, but the full implementation of this tax law was completed in 1444. It took 14 years to fully implement his tax reform. It kind of shows us how he was cautious and prudent in hearing the smallest voices of the people from different classes with different interests. He also created an institution which was responsible for compiling legal codes. He set out a principle for categorizing these law books. The first category was what we call Joon in Korean language, and it contained provisions of permanent observance. And the other category was what we call nok in Korean language, which contained provisions of a relatively temporary regulations. By providing these law books in advance, he ensured that people know the law in advance, and he laid a cornerstone for legal infrastructure throughout Joseon Dynasty. He ensured legal predictability and stability while allowing some room for flexibility, flexible enough to embrace possible change of circumstances in society. He also made sure that people know the law in advance. For example, he mandated his officials to summarize the content of law and make a list of 33 forbidden acts and post it on a city gate so that people coming and going through that city gate view it and know in advance what the law is. He also personally lectured his officials who were responsible for enforcing law so that they could be well versed in new laws and new content of the amended law. There were several innovative measures that were taken by King Sejong in the domain of criminal proceeding. He dreamed of a society where punishment and law were no longer needed. He also thought that punishment was inevitable, but he wanted to regard punishment as a means to educate, enlighten, uplift, and rehabilitate people so that they can be back on the righteous and virtuous path. He also stressed that punishment should be done with extreme caution, especially when it comes to grave cases like murder. He really highlighted the importance of being very meticulous in reviewing the case. And he also stressed the compassion for the accused. In stressing these legal principles, he also highlighted 7 virtues of judges. I will read from the PowerPoint slide. First, do not be swayed by stubborn opinions or fixed patterns of thought. 2, do not believe everything you hear from others without question. 3, do not blindly follow the crowd. 4, do not let old personal ties cause you to hesitate in judgment. 5, do not be pleased simply because the accused confesses quickly. 6, do not rush to conclude legal procedures hastily. And 7, examine all angles and review the facts thoroughly to arrive at the right answer. These virtues all resonate with us judges in 21st century. Another intriguing thing about King Sejong is that he also cared for the emotion and sentiment of the dead. King Sejong the Great said, "We should ensure that the dead hold no resentment and the living bear no grief." And in line with this, he established standardized guidelines for autopsies and forensic procedures. Especially in murder cases, he required his officials to conduct at least 3 forensics to find out the substantive truth of the case. And this led to an enhancement of the credibility in the criminal trial during Joseon period. There were several other innovative measures that were taken by King Sejong. For example, he was opposed to confessions under torture. Of course, 600 years ago, torture was prevalent both in Eastern Hemisphere and Western Hemisphere. But at the same time, King Sejong was very concerned about the side effect of the torture, especially confessions obtained under torture. So he limited the size of the instruments for torture to a smaller size. And he also disciplined the officials who would be involved in illegal torture. Secondly, he was also opposed to prolonged detention. And he also pursued speedy trial. There's a very interesting story when the King Sejong sent one of his officials to the prison because he was unreasonably delaying the criminal proceeding so that he can himself experience the harm and misery of the prolonged detention. And he also disciplined officials who were unduly delaying the criminal proceedings. And third, he envisaged a system quite similar to a 3-tier court system in the modern days. So for example, in the grave cases like murder or robbery, he ensured that the right to be heard by the defendant of the criminal procedure be protected and safeguarded. So he ensured that at least 3 chances should be given to the defendant. He knew that it would inevitably be led to a delay of the adjudication, but he was also very mindful of the need for a thorough investigation to find out the substantive truth of the case. At the same time, he also made sure the trial be swift. For example, he employed a system under which horse riders would deliver legal documents. This is quite comparable to electronic service in our modern days. And he was also very concerned about plight of the common people, especially the people who are in the vulnerable position, and the prisoners in prison. He wanted to keep prisoners warm in winter and cold in summer. And when death occurred during imprisonment, King Sejong obliged his officials to report the cause of the death, illness that they were suffering from, and treatment that was provided to the prisoners. He also banned jailing over 70 or under 15, except in the case of murder and robbery. And he also delayed execution of pregnant women until after 100 days after childbirth. So this is in line with a modern practice of respecting people who are elderly, who are minors, who are expectant mothers. There were some improvements in the domain of civil proceedings as well. For example, when the trial was delayed because of the backlog of the case, he ordered the increase of the number of judicial officials who were in charge of the proceedings. He also disciplined officials when they were unduly delaying the process. And he also required his officials to report to the king about the cause of the delay. And another interesting thing is about personal evaluation of judicial officials. There was a performance evaluation system against judge, and it was done by the senior officials against junior officials. But King Sejong was concerned that the junior officials would be worried about the personal performance evaluation system, so that they would evade from making judgments based on their own conviction and their own observation. So noting this possible side effect, King Sejong abolished performance evaluation system. Instead, he just required judges to report the number of verdicts they have issued. However, it was not without side effect. There were some officials who would unreasonably delay the adjudication. So after 13 years, this system was reinstated again. And some might say that was a failure in his policy, but I see a ruler, a monarch, who bravely faced this challenge of balancing between judicial independence and judicial accountability. King Sejong himself was a judge. He was at the pinnacle of the legal system, and he reviewed many cases. For example, he personally reviewed 536 capital cases during his reign, averaging 32 cases per year. He showed a relatively strict stance toward crimes that is against social order, such as violence against family members or corruption by the officials. And he showed a leniency toward crimes that were committed by the minor or the elderly. And also he was lenient toward the crime that was against himself. I would like to introduce you 4 interesting cases to show you what kind of judge King Sejong was. The first is the curse murder case. This is about a woman who allegedly killed another person through a curse. It's kind of Korean version of witchcraft. Being skeptical of this case, King Sejong ordered re-investigation of this case. He also sent his official to this woman who was detained, saying that the King Sejong himself has a pity for her, that he wishes to know the truth. Upon hearing this woman broke down in tears and admitted that she falsely confessed under torture. It was later found out that this woman was detained for 10 years in prison and that she was subjected to 26 brutal interrogations. King Sejong's commitment to look after an ordinary person spared her life, and she was released with food. The second case is the bandit escape case. This is a case that occurred in Pyongyang. So the boys who were aged 13 and 18 were engaged with robbery. And the ministers called for the death sentence for these boys. However, King Sejong noted that they were young, they were just minors, and he released them, giving them a second chance of rehabilitation, which is somewhat similar to modern juvenile system. Third case is the maid abuse case. So there was a maid servant who were mistreated and abused by her master and his wife. At the time in Joseon, there was a law prohibiting people of lower rank or lower status from filing a lawsuit against the people of higher social ranks. However, King Sejong noted that this incident was accidentally found by the Minister of Justice. So by creatively applying this law, he punished this official, because it was not by the lawsuit by the servant, but it was rather from the observation of the Ministry of Justice. And final case is the shaman case. It's about 7 shamans who are in Seoul who allegedly defrauded people by saying that they can summon ghosts. So there was a very strong public sentiment against these 7 shamans that they should be put to death. However, King Sejong noted that at the time of their alleged crimes, there was no law prohibiting such act. So based on this spirit of Nolla buena sine lege, no punishment without law, he released these 7 shamans. Instead, he ordered the creation of new law, preventing people from misleading other people. It goes without saying that the most celebrated invention or achievement by King Sejong is the creation of 훈민정음. 훈민정음, when literally translated, is a correct sound or proper sound for the instruction of the people. It was completed in 1443, and it was promulgated in 1446. It has 28 letters, modeled after sky, land, and humanity, as well as human vocal organs. It was designed in such a simple and practical form, as has been beautifully described by our Chief Justice. And it was also a system established to guide the people, so that the gap between colloquial language and the written language could be bridged. He also ensured that laws could be understood by everyone. And 훈민정음 or Hangul was an indispensable means to it. Well, let me read from the annals of Joseon Dynasty, which is the detailed record of King Sejong, about the motive of creating 훈민정음. Because the speech of this country is different from that of China, it does not match the Chinese characters. Therefore, even when the ignorant wish to speak their minds, many in the end cannot fully express themselves. Pitying such circumstances, I have newly created 28 letters so that all people may easily learn and conveniently use them in daily lives. And Hangul became an integral part of the daily lives of the ordinary people. And it also influenced the legal proceedings. For example, in 17th century, there's a record of the women filing a lawsuit written in Hangul. And by the late Joseon Dynasty, the Joseon began to make law public in Hangul. I believe that this is a gigantic step toward an egalitarian society, paving a beautiful way for enhancing the access to justice by the public. There was a time in the modern history of Korea when Korea was colonized by Japan. During that time, trial was only conducted in Japanese. But in 1948, when the Republic of Korea was established, we passed a law requiring all the official documents be written in Hangul, including documents by the court. So in that period, we, the Korean judiciary, is striving to write our decisions in a plain and understandable language. I would like to conclude my presentation. We are under global crisis that could undermine the very idea of rule of law. There's mounting pressure to impair judicial independence. We also have an issue of public trust in the judiciary. We have an issue of access to justice by the public. In the middle of all those challenges, I believe that it is very comforting to know that King Sejong also strived to overcome these challenges 600 years ago. He had a deep compassion for his people. his devotion to protect the very idea of rule of law, his dedication to protect human rights of the most vulnerable people in society, and his efforts to lower the bar for access to justice for the common people, they all resonate with us. So by embracing the monumental spirit of King Sejong, which endured 600 years, which transcends the limitation of his era, I'm sure that we can find a wise solutions to the common challenges that we commonly face together today. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.